Swiggity swag. What's in the bag? I'm Freakish, and welcome to the Advanced Water Battling Guide. Now, this guide is for the Water Battling Village world, created by Amorgel in Meta Horizon Worlds. It's a surprisingly deep competitive game, and the water battling masters of the metaverse have come up with some tricks and strategies that kind of set them apart from the rest of the players, and that's what this guide is going to focus on. Now, there are some prerequisites, like you'll have to know the basic moves like the Ice Fist, the Water Whip, the Icicle Spike, the Wave, and of course the Spout. So if you don't know those, go to the world, play around a little bit. There are some signs that will teach you how to do those. There's also some settings that I usually recommend players to change. So if you open up your settings and you go to gameplay and then down to comfort assistance, I usually recommend to turn that off. It makes it easier to see when you're moving around. And if you go to safety and well-being, personal boundary, I usually set that to off as well. It makes it easier to hit with the Ice Fist. And then finally, this is optional of course, but you could turn the world volume down a little bit because it can get a little bit noisy when you have a lot of players that are flying around and hitting things. But the world does sound beautiful, so that's up to your personal preference. All right, well, let's get right into the techniques. The first thing I wanted to talk about was playstyles. Now, every player has their own playstyle, and like any good competitive game, there's no playstyle that's necessarily the best. I do find that most players kind of fall into one of two categories. Either they play a mostly grounded playstyle where they fight from the platforms, and you do have a lot of tools at your disposal if you fight from the platforms, or you play a more aerial playstyle where you hardly ever land on the platforms, and you also have a lot of tools, different tools, when you're in the air. So I think just kind of play around with it and figure out what works best for you. Something that's not the most intuitive to a lot of newer players is that yes, you can stand on the ground and use all your attacking moves, but you can also fly on the spout and use all of those same attacking moves from the air. So you can see me flying around with the Ice Fist. And this is a very strong option, and most competitive players are going to attack from the air at some point, even players that play a mostly grounded playstyle. So you can also fly around with the Water Whip and the Icicle Spike, and if you can fly around with those, you can also fly around and shoot the Wave. So to aim the Wave, it's just depending on where your hand is pointing when you grab the water. But just like normal, when you're on the ground, you just grab the water and you raise your left hand up and it'll shoot a wave. All right, now let's talk about some movement techniques. So everybody knows that you can walk around using the left joystick in Horizon Worlds, but some people might not know that if you click that joystick down while you're walking, your character will start to sprint. And this will increase your speed on the ground, but it will also increase your speed in the air when you're using the spout. It's not something that I use all the time, but it's definitely something that you should be aware of. All right, next we're going to talk about one of the most important techniques to learn in the game, something called spouting. So you can see me doing it here in the background. Basically, I'm using the spout, but I never seem to have a cooldown, because normally after using the spout, there's a cooldown period where you can't use another spout. However, there's a bug with the spout that will let you use the spout whenever you want with no cooldown period. This allows you to fly really close to the water, and most importantly, it allows you to stay in the air and fight easier from the air. To be completely honest, I don't 100% understand why the spout works like that, but I can show you how to replicate it so you can use it in your gameplay. So you see me here using the spout as it normally works. I'm basically spamming it, and you can see there's a cooldown period between each one. But if I pause here for a second, I'm going to point my hand at the water and I'm just going to spam the spout button. And you're going to see there's a delay between the first and the second spout, but then after that, no delay. All right, so if I do it again, there's going to be a delay between the first and the second. There's the delay, and now I can just keep spamming it and use the spout whenever I want. And I'm just doing it on the ground here, but obviously you can fly around with it, and you should be able to like stay in one place, and as soon as your spout is done, you can spawn another one. All right, so there's just one more movement technique that I wanted to talk about. This one's not really useful for fighting, but it is kind of cool to know about, and you actually can get a really fast time on the race by using it. So basically, you can ride on top of the icicle spikes here. It's pretty hard to control if you're going to use it on the race, but I was able to get 7.5 seconds on the race using that technique. You can see there I fell off though. And it's pretty easy to do. Basically, you just need to grab an icicle spike, slam it on the ground so you can walk towards it, and jump on top of it, and as soon as you land on top of it, raise up with your right hand a little bit, and then you can fly all around the map. It's just kind of fun to explore on. But now let's get back to focusing on battling techniques and tricks. So each of the main attacking moves have a few properties that are kind of helpful to know about for competitive play. So starting with the Ice Fist. The Ice Fist is really awesome because there's no cooldown. So you can hit your opponent and immediately follow up with another attack or fly away. So it's a good move to use because it's just really fast. It doesn't slow down your gameplay. And then just a tip when using the Ice Fist, you don't actually have to physically swing your arm. You can just stick your arm out and then run into your opponent. I find that works better. It usually hits them further, and it's just a lot easier to do than having to actually physically swing your arm. The Ice Fist is also really good when flying. You can kind of swoop down, hit your opponent, and then fly away or follow up with another attack. Moving on to the Water Whip and the Icicle Spike, they do share some of the same properties. So if I pick up a ball of water and I throw it and I miss, there's a cooldown period where I can't use another spout and I can't attack. However, if I throw that water and it hits an opponent, I can actually fly away immediately or follow up with another attack. And this also works with the Icicle Spike. One thing that happens a lot with both the Icicle Spike and the Water Whip is you'll grab the water and then your opponent will get too close to you, and they're too close for you to hit them. However, if you swing your arms big and wide and fast like that, it actually causes the water or the spike to come in, and you can hit them when they're standing close to you. Another thing to be aware of with both the Water Whip and the Icicle Spike is that if you throw it and it hits an opponent and you grab more water, the water will despawn from your hands. So if you don't want that to happen, then you have to wait a little bit after hitting an opponent with the Water Whip or the Icicle Spike before grabbing more water. Quick aiming tip with the Icicle Spike. So the Icicle Spike is affected by gravity. So if you're aiming at a target that's kind of far in the distance, you have to shoot above the target. However, if instead you throw a water ball, which is not affected by gravity, you can aim directly at the target and then turn it into an icicle spike in the air by pressing the B button. Another good thing to note about the icicle spike is you don't actually have to throw it. You can just hold it and swing it into your opponent and it'll count as a hit. You can also do this while on the spout, which I use all the time. Alright, moving on to the wave. So the wave has a few functions besides just being offensive. You can also use it defensively to save yourself, and this is known as the wave save. You can see it demonstrated here, but basically just before you hit the water, you spawn a wave directly below yourself. And the reason why this is so good is because when you're in hit stun, you can't use the spout to save yourself, but you can grab water, which means you can spawn the wave. And in a lot of situations, it's the only way you can stop yourself from getting knocked out. And that's why I think it's a must-learn for every competitive player. Another useful thing to know about the wave is that similar to the Ice Fist, you have no cooldown after using it. So you can use a wave and immediately use the spout or grab the water to follow up with another attack. Moving on to probably the most advanced technique in the game so far, something known as wave canceling. I'm just going to show it here a couple times. So I pick up the water, hit the opponent, use a wave, and fly away. So let's do that again. Pick up the water, hit the opponent, use a wave, and fly away. So it might be kind of tricky to see what the usefulness of this is, but basically think of it like this. You're holding water and you want to use the spout. What is the fastest way to do that? If you remember from the Water Whip section, if you throw the Water Whip and let's say you miss your opponent, there's a cooldown period where you can't use the spout. So throwing the water is not the answer. However, you probably remember from the wave section that the wave does not cause a cooldown period. So the answer is to use the wave to cancel the cooldown that you would have normally have gotten by using the water whip. So the wave cancel is just canceling the cooldown period of the water whip. And the reason why that's so good is because it allows you to play faster. It allows you to throw out more hitboxes because you don't have to wait for the cooldown, which can lead to you getting more knockouts in a match, which can make the difference between you winning and losing. And that's really it. That's all the techniques that there are to learn. However, the game isn't just about techniques, it's also about strategy. So I'm just going to let some high-level footage kind of play in the background so that you can see all those techniques that I just talked about in action. And while that's happening, I'm going to talk a little bit about strategy. So there's kind of two main strategies, right? You can either play really defensive or you can play really offensive, and both are good. And I think most players will use some blend of both, where they'll play defensive in some situations and play offensive in others. But if you play a more defensive play style, you probably spend more time evading attacks than you do throwing out attacks against other players. You probably stay in areas where even if you do get hit, you're going to survive. An example would be flying high enough in the arena so that if you do get hit, you still have time after the hit stun ends to use a spout, or you have enough time to react with a wave save to save yourself. Sometimes defensive players will get called out for playing too campy, but playing campy has its drawbacks as well. If you play too high to where it's difficult to knock you out, you're also going to struggle to knock other players out because you're not as close to the action. So you're not going to get as many points and you're not going to win matches. But it definitely is possible to play pretty safe while still having offensive pressure, especially because the water whip has pretty good range. So you can kind of keep your distance while still being an offensive threat. Now, if you're a player that plays a more offensive play style, this would kind of be like me. Sometimes I play too offensive. Basically, you play really fast. You usually use sprinting, both on the ground or while flying. You do a lot of wave canceling to cancel the cooldown of the water whip. But it's definitely possible to play too offensive, overextending your combos, which can open you up to counterattacks. A good example, and this is something that I kind of struggle with, is I might use my wave cancel to cancel the cooldown of my water whip, and then someone might hit me out of the air, and I'll try to use a wave save, but I can't because my wave is off canceling the cooldown, and it's not there to save me. Moral of the story, every player is going to play some combination of offensive and defensive, and it's just up to you to find that right blend that works the best for you. I play more offensive, and I just think it's more fun, but some players might like a more defensive play style, and there's nothing wrong with that. And finally, there's just kind of one more thing I wanted to talk about in this video, and that is mind games. Now, I think that mind games are kind of the key to true mastery. Now, to have good mind games, you have to have a really good grasp on all the previous fundamentals that we covered in this video, because with mind games, you don't have the mind to spare to think about, how do I use a wave cancel, or how do I do the wave save? All of that has to happen automatically so that you can use your full focus on reacting and adapting to your opponent's playstyle. And your opponent will probably change playstyles at least slightly throughout the match, especially if they're losing. Or if you're losing, you're going to have to change your playstyle a little bit too. And it just totally depends on what is your opponent doing, what is working against your opponent. Basically, the goal of mind games is to play tricky to get an upper hand in situations against your opponent. Maybe you bait them by pretending like you're vulnerable, letting them hit you, and then you come back at them with a counterattack. Or maybe you fake them out by pretending like you're going to attack them and waiting a little bit until they let their guard down and then finally letting out the attack. And that concludes the Advanced Water Battling Guide. Thanks so much for staying till the end. I know it was kind of a long video. I did want to say one final thing. Stay tuned for the Water Battling League Tournament Series that's coming out very soon at the time of making this video. Huge shout out to Immorgal for his hard work. He actually created a whole separate world. It has a new arena, and it has all the same water battling mechanics. So stay on the lookout. I hope to see you out in the arena. To close this video, enjoy this teaser of the new Water Battling League world. Peace.